wanted the best? You've got the best podcast, the hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
I'm Chris Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Sometimes she just jumps me right on my seat, wakes me up. The good old Iron Lady sings it. That makes it official. Welcome to the big show for 2,500 episodes and 16 years of being the Chris Voss Show, going on our 17th year. What are we going to do with that? I don't know, make 17 more and give people something to do. But in the meantime, we need you to refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives, the plugs, as it were. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1 on the TikTok and all those crazy places on the internet. Today, we have an amazing young lady on the show. We're going to be talking about her book called Embracing the Autism Spectrum, Finding Joy and Hope, Navigating the Neurodiver, a faith-integrated guide from personal and professional experience. Today, we've got Stephanie C. Holmes on the show with us today. We're going to be talking about her book, her insights, and some of the things we can learn from all of that. Stephanie Holmes is a doctor and formerly licensed professional counselor in the state of North Carolina. She received her bachelor's degree in psychology from Campbell University, her master's in consulting from Liberty University, and her doctorate in education from Abilene Christian University. She is an ordained minister, author, autism researcher, speaker, and certified autism specialist. She was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, and her world and focus changed from a thriving marriage and family therapy practice to a world of individualized educational programs, 504 educational programs, and understanding how to help students and individuals with challenges and needs in the classroom and church setting. Today, she pulls from a personal as well as professional experience to focus on neurodiverse marriages and family systems. She's the owner and founder of Autism Spectrum Resources for Marriage and Family, LLC, and she and Dan co-founded the International Association of Neurodiverse Christian Marriage, LLC, and the podcast Neurodiverse Christian Couples. Welcome to the show. How are you, Stephanie?
I am glad to be here. Nice to meet you today, Chris.
It's glad to have you as well. Give us the .coms. Where do you want people to find you on the interwebs?
All right. You can find us at Holmes, like my name is spelled. That's Holmes like Sherlock, HOLMES, HolmesASR.com, and ChristianNeurodiverseMarriage.com. And you can find us where podcasts are. Look up Neurodiverse Christian Couples Podcast.
There you go. And so give us a 30,000 overview of what's inside your book.
Okay, so inside of our book, my daughter was diagnosed with Asperger's, which is now autism spectrum 1. And so the book, when I originally wrote a book back in 2015 that I have pulled since, it was really my story as a mom, kind of partly telling my daughter's story. But as my daughter became an adult and she said, hey, Mom, I would kind of like to do a writing project with you. What if we make it a mother-daughter book? So you can tell part of the story that you remember. I'll kind of come in where you leave off. And then my other daughter said, well, what about my experience as a sibling and my own journey? And then my husband said, well, I got diagnosed too. What about my journey? So boom, it turned into a 4-person family journey story book.
This might be the first time we've had one of those on the show. I mean, we've had authors, thousands, but this might be the first time we've had a whole family on a book.
Yeah, we thought it would be interesting perspective. A lot of books out there from the neurodivergent person's perspective or maybe a parent. But this one we thought could really add in marriage and family by talking about marriage dynamics, the diagnosis dynamics, and really just kind of impact of the whole family, because families are a system and each part kind of impacts each other.
That's true. I've experienced that as a child.
Good, bad, and ugly, right?
Good, bad, and ugly. Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. So this is really interesting. So in the book, you guys talk about all your different aspects from your point of view. Do I clarify that correctly?
Yes. So it kind of starts off with me telling the majority of the story. I just happen to be the history keeper of the family and the
Ah,
documenter, of the
there you
family.
go.
So it kind of starts with kind of my journey into young motherhood, not knowing what to do, challenges when you have a child that's on the spectrum, especially a
Yeah.
girl 20 years ago when we weren't talking about girls being on the spectrum. And then kind of how that starts to impact family systems, marriage, the sibling relationship. And I'll tell Sydney's story up until about middle school. And then she kind of takes over from middle school to her adult life. And Erica comes in as a sibling, kind of tells what she's experiencing. And then she's ADHD, which is another form of neurodivergence. And then Dan's the last one to get diagnosed. And then we are like, oh, we're a neurodiverse marriage. That's complex and challenging. We should talk a little bit about that.
Neurodiverse marriage. Yeah, that's pretty wild. So, um, the this would be interesting to do in writing the. I'm kind of interested in how this book got written. What was it like writing as a family? I mean, were there things you guys found out about each other that like I remember my mom read my book and she's like, I didn't know a lot of that stuff went on. And I was like, really? You were there? But was there maybe some surprises or wrangling that had to take place to get some things on paper?
Well, we started with a writing coach to kind of get us going because it's really difficult, as you
Uh-huh.
said, taking four people and tried to write a cohesive book. We kind of had everybody write out their kind of throw up chapters or what they wanted to do, and it was very
Hmm.
important that
Hmm.
each person read everybody else's chapter. That this was not,
Yeah.
a Springer gotcha moment of, ooh, I'm going to reveal something in the book. We wanted everybody to feel open and honest. But we
Hmm.
also wanted to give each other permission to be honest about our lived experience. I don't want to paint this super over positive picture, but neither do I believe autism ruins lives. So,
Yeah.
telling the whole story with the positive and the challenges and kind of bringing that story with the truth in there, but hope. It's hard and challenging and difficult, but there is hope and joy in the journey.
Most definitely. I mean, some of the most smartest people, savants, are on the autism spectrum. We've had a lot of people on that have either experienced that as a parent, like yourself, or experienced that as a child, as yourself, or they're on the spectrum themselves and written some books. I think we just had someone recently on that helps. I think they have a big autism event they're holding. If you want to reach out to me on email after, I can send you a thing. But I think there's a big event they're holding in New York later this year, I think, or something. But yeah, it brings challenges. I have friends that have children that have autism, and they've talked on social media for years about what it was like when they first, they started discovering. They're like, why isn't I'm just going to make up a name here. Why isn't Bobby talking and interacting at a certain age like the other children were? And then they go in and they find out that he's on the spectrum, and then I've seen the kind of dynamics when I hang out with them or go out to dinner with them as a family, and and see how much impact that has. And it's a family. It's a everyone's got challenges usually in any given family, different personalities and different makeups, and so you all either have to learn to get along, or I don't know, my family didn't get along very well, me and my brother. So I love you guys have put this down on paper and made it so that you people can see a kind of a sitting example of a family in action.
Yeah, and you think about that some families, if they don't have the resources, and we live in more of an individualized culture over here in the West, where families don't tend to live near family support as
Mhm.
much anymore. And so a lot of families who have kids with special needs of any kind can find themselves isolated because how do going out to eat, going to Disney World, going on a plane, these are very
Yeah.
challenging things anyway with young children, but have more challenges and complexities when you're trying to do that with kids with needs and differences. And so you have to be much more intentional. You need support. You need the right support. And because if you become isolated, that's also going to impact your relationships, your mental health, your emotional health. And I always say you can't let your whole home become so autism focused, you lose the individuals within the home. Autism doesn't have to become the sun that the solar system of the family revolves around. Every person is an important piece of the system, and we have to figure out how to accommodate each other. But you can't just accommodate one person or one person's needs in the family. And that's tricky.
And I would totally agree with you. I had three siblings, so we had 4 children in our family, and the 4th child was born with cerebral palsy, massive birth defects, wasn't supposed to live past your first few months. And when she did finally get stabilized and come home, and she lived for 40 years, she was throwing up medicines, she was having to be fed constantly, she was blind. And she took up a lot of the family's time and energy, and she was the focus because we were trying to keep her alive. I mean,
Right.
that's kind of how the first 10 years went, is trying to keep her alive. And it was a daily struggle. She couldn't keep her meds down. There was all sorts of complications. And so I felt as a child, I felt the empathy of, the situation, but I also felt some part of neglect. I felt, like she was the central linchpin of the family, and we were trying to keep her alive. I mean, it was day to day, and she was living on oxygen, but still I felt that way. And I'm sure my other siblings kind of felt a little bit of alienation too, because it was a constant battle every day for our parents to keep her stable. And so I feel what that's like. Now your husband is neurodivergent. Did you weren't aware of that, and that may have made you realize, and maybe you talked about this in the book, some of the things between that relationship between a husband and wife, that may have changed maybe how you were interacting or saw the communication from each other, maybe.
Yeah. So we had originally, kind of thought that maybe actually in one of the books, I can't remember which one I've written to at this point, but in one of the books, I talk about the tale of 2 marriages. Dan's
Mm.
marriage was going just fine, and my marriage wasn't going so well. And we thought that that was because of having a child with needs. I mean, just
Mhm.
everything you do is hard. Church is hard. School is hard. Advocating for the school, threatening to sue the school, all the things you have to do for your kids. And we thought, well, this must be it, just the extra challenges and complexities of life. But we moved, we got our daughter in a stable and better school environment. And then things still weren't clicking or connecting. And so from that point, Dan actually had always thought that, he was kind of a lot like Sydney. And so he kind of self-identified. And then we went through an assessment process back in
Wow.
2019. And there we go. There's that extra layer of complexities and challenges that we didn't know was there in our family system.
And it probably is a bit of acceptance and acknowledgement, and kind of change up from maybe your experience on your end, where you're like, oh, maybe by understanding this concept of him being neurodivergent or not divergent, you guys can figure out where some of the barriers maybe you're hitting in communication, interaction in your relationship.
Absolutely. Because I think first of all of us get married with certain expectations. From what we've seen on either TV or in our own family, what we like about that, what we don't like about that. But then when you add in, you're coming in, you don't even know you have 2 different neurotypes, so to speak,
Mhm.
and you have this expectation, this kind of chart going forward, this map going forward that looks like 2 neurotypical people who are married. And so you start having all these challenges and all these difficulties. And so if you keep trying to map toward a relationship of 2 neurotypical people, it's going to be highly unsatisfying for both people. But when you sit back and say, you know what, I really loved certain things about you, and this is how we do things differently. Here's our barriers. We need to change our communication style. We need to change some of our expectations of how we get things done, make our system work for us, versus trying to map on some unrealistic expectation of marriage that doesn't work for anybody, but is even more complex for a neurodiverse couple.
There you go. Yeah, and you mentioned Disneyland earlier before. My friends who have a neurodivergent son, he one thing he doesn't do well with is too much input or data coming at him. So large crowds, busy environments of people can really overwhelm him, and he'll shut down. And sometimes he'll go into crisis, fight or flight mode, and be very upset. Sometimes he just shuts down. He just can't function, and they have to stop and wait. And I've seen the pictures of him do it. And they took him to Disneyland, and yeah, he struggled, but they kind of got him a little bit through it. But he had his moments where they had to give him his space and let him shut down and let him do the thing. And I think stuff like this is really important because they're functioning human beings too. Sometimes they're smart enough, sometimes they're really good at doing one thing or a couple things really well beyond what most of us could do. There's a lot of savants that are on the autism spectrum, and they're just amazingly, shockingly brilliant. So we just need to make space for that and make it go. And I love how you put this all into a book, so everyone with the family, so everyone can get that experience. Like I said, this is kind of the first time. Maybe people should make more family books.
Different perspectives, right? Different perspectives depending on who you are in the system reading the book.
I'm pretty sure my family never would have get the book done. We'd be fighting the whole freaking time over the freaking book. So there you go. Now you put this from a Christian perspective, and so you interweave your Christian values and stuff like that in the book as well. Tell us about how that works and what advice that can give people that might be looking for it in that spectrum.
Yeah, so there are so many resources out there that are available, kind of faith-free, so to speak. And what we felt was missing was the faith element. And so even though our faith specifically is Christian faith, even people who are not our same faith have kind of read the book just because they want to see how, religion or faith is even interwoven into the story. There's some other kind of complexities that can come along with the religious and church world. And so I'm going to challenge some of you out there in the Christian and church world, but there's still some myths and kind of superstitions that if someone in your family has a need or a disability, that someone has sinned or there's a curse or somebody's done something wrong. That sounds ancient, but that actually still exists and is alive and well in some churches today. And so many families who have a child with any form of need, not just autism, don't feel welcomed in many evangelical churches. In fact, I was trying to find it so I could cite the source, but there's only 9 to 12% of evangelical churches in America who are able and equipped to handle children with special needs. And so that's huge. We've got to do better than that. We've got to do better in the faith community.
Yeah. And schools too, I think still probably struggle, don't they, with to understand and be inclusive to autism? Is that are schools getting better, or do they still suffer as well?
I think things are getting better. It's kind of like a combination of the seasoned teacher, who really keeps up on their learning, and then some of our newer teachers who are coming in, who are getting a little bit more education and understanding as they're coming in. But there's always the fight between the school and the parent on like how much is enough. The very vague concept is called free and appropriate public education. That is what the law says that the state is required to give is FAPE. And so the parents are going to want more than just a base model of just get my kid through school. My daughter had 150 something IQ. I wanted her to go on a college preparatory track. I didn't want her in a special ed room, filling ice trays and finger painting all day. She had much more capability and potential. And so, especially when a child is what they call twice exceptional with high IQ plus some behavior and emotional challenges, it can be challenging for the school to meet all of the needs of the child. They either want to kind of put too much expectation on or kind of sequester them away. And that's where a collaborative approach is going to be best for the potential of the child. And sometimes that gets lost when the school and the parents are fighting.
There you go. Yeah. Now, do you talk about how to do that? Maybe give advice to parents in the book, or maybe just your stories so that parents can, understand how to advocate for their child in the education system.
So in this book specifically, we kind of talk through our journey, what worked and what didn't work, some of the personalities that we encountered along the way. In the back of the book, I did put some articles and blogs that I've written, but it wasn't solely satisfying for the reader. So I do have a book in progress right now about empowering autistic voices, and it is an entire book that is coming out March of 2024 about advocacy and tips for educators. It's really meant for educators, administrators, and parents on how to collaborate, tips and guidelines specifically for autism students. What I really like about the book is I brought in authors who are neurodivergent, who are professionals, who can
Yeah.
write from their lived experience plus their professional experience on what would be helpful for kids and teens who are autistic in the school system.
Yeah. I mean, 150, what'd you say, 150 IQ level?
Yeah.
It's pretty darn good. She's smarter than most of us.
Yeah, we just
Yeah.
had to harness some of that energy. Had to
Harness
harness
energy.
the
I mean,
energy.
they have the ability to focus on stuff, and it depends on, I guess, where they're on the spectrum, but they can master certain things and master them beyond, a journeyman sort of level or expert level. Like I say, I watched several of the savants do their thing. There was one guy, he was a savant, and he knew he could tell you every zip code in America. It's just crazy. You tell him the city, and he could tell you the zip code, and that's a lot of zip codes. I don't even know how many there are, but he could do it.
Yeah, and that could be so frustrating for a teacher or parents. Like, wait a minute, how can you memorize every zip code, but we can't get the spelling list done? We just have 7 spelling words. Let's focus on the 7 spelling words. That's so frustrating sometimes.
That sounds pretty good. So now you took in you from LPC to going back to school for doctorate. You had a pretty hard life, midlife. Why would you go back and get a doctorate in education that doesn't seem to line up with psychology or counseling? I guess that was something you did.
Yeah, so kind of started out, psychology and counseling is what gets you down the road for being a licensed professional counselor. You're doing marriage and family work, individual counseling, all that good stuff. As I kind of shifted my focus, realizing there weren't a lot of therapists, coaches, and counselors who were working with families with autism, and then another niche of Christian or faith-based families with autism, I
Mhm.
thought like, what helps me get seats at the table and what would really help my clientele? And I couldn't figure out why a PhD in psychology would really help me in any way, shape, or form. So I thought, getting an education degree would get me a seat at the educators table. And then my
Ah.
concentration was communication. So everything I
Mhm.
did was like, how do I get a seat at that table? I became an ordained
Oh.
minister to get a seat in the religious table, so
Ah,
to speak.
there you go. Represent the spectrum then?
I'm sorry?
Representing the spectrum and
Yes.
and advocating for these sort of things for inclusion and stuff, and to, I mean, everyone has something to contribute to this world and make it better. And I can't point anything to neurodivergent people I know off the top, but I know I've had so many great, amazing speakers, authors, and stuff on the show that were neurodivergent, and their contributions are just amazing. Um, there's a phrase, I guess, uh, I don't know if I've heard this one. Isn't everyone on the spectrum? Do you like that phrase or not?
That's a really pet peeve phrase of mine. So,
Is it? Yeah.
people who just don't really understand that autism, yes, it's a spectrum, and so there can be people, profoundly or severely challenged to, like you said, savants or highly educated, highly intellectual people. But when people are trying to I'll give another example. So, I had a colleague of mine that used to say, "Oh, everybody here at our company, we're colorblind," supposing to mean we don't recognize you by your color. But if you
Yeah.
are a person of color, does that sound great that you're not going to recognize my color as part of who I am?
Hmm.
So when we say things like, well, isn't everyone a little bit on the spectrum? We're not really honoring the dignity and the individuality of people who are on the spectrum. Just like I hate it over Christmas and Facebook time when people are like, oh, I have Christmas OCD. No, you do not have Christmas OCD. You might like things in a specific way, but that doesn't mean you have OCD. So I think, people starting to use therapeutic words and phrases in common discussion, like gaslighting. If I hear gaslighting one more time used incorrectly, it's like, no, you're not being gaslit just because they disagree with you. So some terms find themselves in commonplace conversation, and then they get taken out of context, and then it starts to lose the meaning of what they are for that community.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, that's that sounds like a real dismissive sort of statement. I've never heard that, but I think I've heard rattles of an alluding to that. Yeah, I don't know. People say all sorts of weird shit. I think sometimes they do it just to try and they don't understand things, and so they're just fumbling at some sort of thing. Have you seen inclusion work or not work in the school system or houses of faith? I mean, maybe a good book in the future might be a manual for these organizations how to deal with this. I don't even know what resources they have.
So in the faith-based world, I'll throw some out there. If you are a person, you're a pastor or a church leader, you should contact SOAR, SOAR, Johnny and Friends, Key Ministry, Together We Care. They have trainings, they have books, they have resources, they have conferences. They are happy to help train leaders, from church leaders to volunteers to maybe even your parking lot and building have barriers to inclusion. So there's so many resources out there. In the school setting, especially, this could be a topic all of itself, but with the potential dismantling of the Department of Education, that's going to cause a lot of havoc from state to state and district to district. And so that's going to become, I imagine it's going to be more challenging in the years to come as we're trying to figure that out.
Yeah. There's a lot of resources that were cut off in the Department of Education, and a lot of people that knew what they were doing, and employees that were working to serve that. Did they have a department for autism people on the spectrum at Department of Education, or a lot of resources they were providing?
So what many people don't know when they say that they're, for vouchers or for dismantling the Department of Education, while there are states' rights and how, schools run within districts and states, the Department of Education was the major funder of special education. It's a funder of civil rights, people getting their civil rights, in the school system. So that's what a 504 is, making sure things are fair for all people. And then an individualized education plan, which is something that is set up for a specific child with needs. Most of the funding was coming from the Department of Education. So that's a little problematic. They say they're going to redistribute that. They're going to come up with a different way of doing it. But that was kind of where the resources and the funding was coming from, was the Department of Ed.
Yeah, that's unfortunate that we've lost that. I don't know how far they've shut down the department, and I guess there's still lawsuits that are ongoing over the whole experience. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. But it's unfortunate that this impacts especially children of needs. That can make a difference, and we can't have, what's that old Bush line, child left behind, no child left behind, although I think that program did, so there was an irony there evidently. Big surprise with politicians, their ironicism. Now I think you have a YouTube channel and a podcast. Do you want to get a plug in for that as well?
Yeah, if you're looking for me on YouTube, it's Dr. Stephanie C. Holmes. And so there's a couple of different things on there. My daughter, Sydney, she shared a little bit of her story. She has some YouTubes that she's made for teachers, tips for helping autistic students, things you should do, things you shouldn't do. I might be interviewing various people like Dr. Temple Grandin or Dr. Tony Atwood, who are in the autism spectrum, in the autism field. And then my husband and I talk about our story, or we interview people. We take little bips and blips of our podcast and stick it on YouTube for those who really like the video. And then pretty much anywhere where you're looking for a podcast, Neurodiverse Christian Couples is all autism all the time. We might talk about research, what's happening in the field, breaking myths, bad information about autism in your relationships, autism in marriage, all kinds of things. You'll find a lot of different things on the program.
That is awesome. I wonder how many relationships maybe end in marriage, divorce, or not ended marriage, ended divorce or breakups, or maybe struggling right now because they don't understand that maybe one of the partners I don't know if there's a possibility both partners could be on the spectrum in some way, but there's all sorts of combinations of relationships. Maybe they're just not aware of this thing happening. I think one of our recent autism spectrum interviews just last week or something, I think we talked about that. Someone later in life figured out that they were on the spectrum, and then light goes on and they realize that, oh, all of my communication, and this is why we can't make things sync up. So I think this is a real important discussion you're having. I just love the fact that your whole family did a book together. That's awesome. And you guys still like each other after that.
We do. We live in different states, but we do still like each other.
Oh,
We
okay, there you
just together, and it went well.
Yeah. For us, we just fight more, I think, or something. I don't know. That book could ever get written. We'd just be fighting over the manuscript for the next decade. But anyway, families, you can't choose them. They come. That's why the Chris Voss Show family loves you, because we don't want to feel you left out if you have trouble with your family. What's the future hold for what you're doing? Any future books coming out? Any future projects people should be aware of?
Yeah, so we've been talking about embracing the autism spectrum, our family book. And then as an autism researcher, I put some research together, and we talk about, and uniquely us, gracefully navigating the maze of neurodiverse marriage. One of the points that you made that we found in our research of over 300 people in a neurodiverse couple is there is a high divorce rate. There's a little bit lower of a divorce rate in our religious communities, but they're sticking it out for religion, not really because they're happy, but because they feel like their religion would be problematic if they got a divorce. But we did find that over 80% of those who participated in our survey were diagnosed with autism over the age of 40. So it usually happened when a grandchild, somebody in the family got diagnosed. Everybody starts researching it. And it's like, wow, Uncle Bob, Aunt Betty, Sally, this makes a lot of sense, in our family. So that one that one came out this March of 2025. And then the book that's in publication right now to be released in March of 2026 by Future Horizons is Empowering Autistic Voices, Bridges and Barriers to Inclusive Education. So that one has a forward by Temple Grandin. So we're super excited about that. And then we're working on possibly a Patreon. We've had a lot of interest in maybe doing a Patreon in 2026. So we'll see. That's a high hope.
Yeah. There you go. Well, I can see you influencing other people and groups. Facebook groups are a great thing too, as well. Sharing this information, getting people aware, and probably save some marriages. Maybe there's some relationships. That's interesting. Over 40 stat. It really is. So people can check out your books. They can find out more. They can read about your experience. That's probably an interesting thing for anyone to read your book, because, if you've got someone or you in your family who's neurodivergent, or if you have friends or coworkers. I know many of my friends that are on the spectrum, they have trouble in work environments because they're not really designed for them, and communication is sometimes the challenge in them. And sometimes they just communicate differently, or they interpret differently communication. So, anything we can do to get everybody on board and everybody inclusive, so they can, everyone can be a contributing member of society, and we can help utilize them to the best of their abilities. Because, 150 IQ level, man, we need cancer solved.
That's right.
Let's look into that. Anyway, so Stephanie, anything more we want to talk about on the show before we go?
I think as we're continuing to broaden our perspective and understanding of autism, I think that's really important for people to understand. And part of we call it the lost generation of autism, because we did have a huge criteria shift in our diagnostic language, right? So most of us, if you think Rain Man, think of the movie, think of autism, think of Rain Man. They think savant, they think institutionalized. And a lot of people still have that idea that autism is associated with IQ. And that's why I kind of brought up my daughter's IQ, not just to brag about her because I'm her mom, but we have conflated autism and IQ. And so we have to see autism as its own spectrum, where people can be high IQ or can be severely and profoundly impacted. So we got to break away someone's IQ from what the spectrum is. And I think if we will continue to lower the stigma around that, because sometimes people over the age of 40 have a hard time accepting that label or diagnosis for themselves. And I think it's because of the negative stigma still that we carry in society about any kind of label or identification.
There you go. There you go. Well, I'm glad you've discussed this and put it out, and you're sharing so much stuff because you're changing the world with your story, and that's what we do on the Chris Voss Show. We examine these stories and talk about them and everything else. So, thank you very much, Steffi, for coming on the show, and also give us your .coms as we go out.
All right. Again, it is HolmesASR.com, ChristianNerdiverseMarriage.com, and on podcast, you're looking for Nerdiverse Christian Couples.
There you go. And thanks to my audience for tuning in. Order up her book wherever fine books are sold. I think this is an amazing read. Embracing the Autism Spectrum, Finding Joy and Hope, Navigating the Neurodiver, a faith-integrated guide from personal and professional experience. Out December 27th, 2023. Thanks so much for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1 on the TikTok, and all those crazy places on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you guys next time.